Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke. I'm a 3D motion design freelancer, and this is my podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Today, I'm super excited because I'm going to go ahead and paint that cheesecake, which we had in the last episode. We went over the steps on how to get your models ready from Cinema 4D in order to import into Substance Painter 3D, and we also had another episode where we went over how to make custom textures, and I'll leave links to both of those. But you can see that this is the cheesecake that I had practiced on last, and I think we can do a better job, so I'm going to give this another go, and you can create something along with me if you'd like to, and I'll also walk through the steps and what I'm doing and why, so that if you want to make something similar, hopefully you learn something from my little experiment here. And another thing is that if you'd also like to just see other artists' work and share your own work and learn from other artists, we do have a Discord channel, so you can check it out in the link below as well. I'm going to go back to where we actually left off before in the other episode. So I'm going to go into my files and let's go to this one. Okay, so here's our cheesecake, and I'm going to need to texture this, of course. In the last episode, we had shown how that mask works on these carrots. So we're building off of where we left off last time. We have some ambient occlusion in here. And we also have in our base just a normal map. It makes a really big difference. If I turn this off, you can see that this is not as textured. So the normal map really adds a whole lot to this. So in here, we just have some of the textures we've made. We went through the whole process of taking a photo of the cheesecake and how to turn that into textures here. And I'm just going to use these in order to create some brushes because I think that'll be really helpful. So what I'd like to first do is add in a paint layer. So I'll click on this little brush icon right there, and it's going to add in a new layer. And I can drag this up and down wherever I would like it to be. Right now I want it to be here, and I'm going to name this one crust because we're going to add in the crust in this layer. And these layers work a lot like Photoshop. So as you're working in them, you can kind of think of it in a similar way. The top layer builds on top of the layers below. And right now I want this crust layer to actually be affecting the color. So where it says material, you can choose what channels we're affecting. We want to affect color. We want to affect the normal map. We can affect the roughness. We don't really need metalness, but we can keep metalness in here. I'll just have the metalness set to 0. For our base color, I'm going to want to grab my image of the crust. I'll drop that in the color. For the roughness, we do want this to have a little bit of roughness. This isn't really going to be a shiny thing, so I'm just going to put that around there. This isn't going to be metallic, so that can be left on 0. As far as the normal map goes, we can paint normal maps on top of our existing normal maps. So for that, we actually do have a crust normal map. We went over how to make a normal map, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop this right there. So now we have all of this stuff in here. And you can see that we have our paintbrush selected here. And if I start painting, we can see this crust texture that we've made. And we can decide if it's the right size or not. I'm going to hit undo. If we scroll up to the top, you'll have additional settings here. So this is kind of like a nice overview in case if you need to jump into this. So you can adjust the size of your brush in here. You can also adjust it with the right and left brackets, which is really nice because it feels very similar to Photoshop. You can also adjust the minimum and maximum size, the amount of spacing. So if I make the spacing really far, you'll see that it's not as smooth and there's actual spacing between the brush strokes. You can adjust the opacity as well. So if you don't want something fully opaque, you can kind of reduce that a little bit. I'm going to increase the spacing a little bit. Increase the flow. Decrease the spacing. So you can kind of just play around with it until it feels right to you. You can also adjust if it follows the angle of your brush and such like that. Follow path. So that's nice that that's an option. I might keep that on. Can adjust the hardness of the brush in here. So that's like the fall off. If I make this a really hard brush, you can see that there's no longer that nice fall off there. It just makes a solid circle kind of in a way. I like this to be a little bit softer so that we can blend and hopefully make this look less like a repeating texture. But you can see that it also has that normal map effect. So this looks like a bumpy surface. We aren't just painting the color, we're actually painting all of these channels we have selected here. So that's really nice. And so without any further ado, let's get painting on here. So I just want to paint in this area. And you can see that I'm going over the edge a little bit, and that's not a super big deal because we could handle this a few different ways. We could either mask it, but more than that, we can also erase. So I'm just gonna kind of go over the area further than what I need to do, knowing that I'm just gonna erase back again. Because I kind of like the texture this size, and maybe I should have tried to make it so that it would also be easier to add it as a smaller size maybe. But this is okay for right now. And there's the eraser. So we went over that. Eraser has very similar settings here: size, spacing, opacity, and such. So for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up. If you hold shift, it'll make a straight line. So I mean, this is Cheesecake, so I don't really think it needs to be that straight of a line, but I'm just going to go ahead and erase this back a little bit. So the aesthetic that I'm kind of going for here today is I'm thinking of the food in Animal Crossing. Like, I don't want this to be super hyper realistic, but I want it to be a little bit realistic and cute. So I'm not going for trying to look like this is a photo of a cheesecake. I'm just going for something that is honestly fun to make and a little bit more of that Animal Crossing aesthetic. So I'm just gonna go ahead in here. And also, if you're working on a project, I'm super curious. So, share it in the comments. Let us know what you're working on, what kinds of cool things you're doing. I honestly love to hear about people's projects. That was one of my favorite things about being in studio in college, was that there were just other people making things and I could walk up to them and be like, hey, so what are you making today? I'd love to hear about it. And people love talking about their projects, and I love hearing about their projects, so it was just the best environment for me. But yeah, now I'm a freelancer. Most of the time, I have to rely on social media for that now. But, that was fun. That was fun. And one other thing that I'd like to just mention real quick is that you can actually adjust the opacity of your layers. So you can see that we have this opacity here. Right now we have this set to normal. We can set this to pass through and try different options. Don't like the overlay. But you'll notice that these sound a lot like the ones you can find inside of Photoshop, so super duper fun. We kind of have our crest blocked in here. And if I just want to double check that I didn't accidentally paint on anything I shouldn't have, what I like to do is actually add a mask. So I'll go in here and I'll add a color mask. So we went over how to set this up, how to set up the ID mask in the last episode. So I'm just going to do that here. I'm going to pick the color of the cheesecake. So now we know we aren't accidentally drawing on other things we shouldn't be, like the carrots or this up here. So that's looking pretty good. And now we're going to need to add this up here. And the really fun thing about this is I did take photos of the cheesecake. So if you have any photo references or anything like that, it's really helpful. So you can see I have a bunch of photos here. And it's always good to have some kind of photo reference. I think it's also good to print these out, but if you don't have a printer, at least try to put them on a screen next to you. Or if you don't have enough screens for your computer, maybe use an iPad or something like that. Try to have some way to have this next to you. I also want to take a look at my brushes in here. So this one is of the side of the cheesecake, so I think that's a pretty good place to get started. But we also have this one that's for the top, because I noticed that the top of the cheesecake had a little bit of a different texture. Maybe I'll do the top first. Okay, so let's add in another paint layer. And this I'm going to call Cheesecake. And now when I scroll down, I can make sure that I have what I want selected. So I need the color selected, the roughness, the metal, normal. So that looks good. And I'm no longer painting the crust, so I can drag and drop the pumpkin spice texture into here. And you can kind of get a little bit of a preview of what that looks like. But right now we also need to remove the normal map because I don't want that affecting this. This is a little bit of a smoother part. You'll also notice I'm starting to draw on this here, and I'm not really meaning to do that. So I'm going to right-click on this, go back into my masks, and add a mask. Select the cheesecake so we aren't drawing on anything we shouldn't be. And now I can click on this here and continue adjusting our settings. I want this to be a little bit shinier than the crust. So I'll bring that up. And I also want the crust to show up more than this layer. So I want to be able to not accidentally remove the crust by drawing. So I'll adjust that. This shouldn't have any metallicness to it. I mean, it's a cake, so that's pretty self-explanatory. One of the things that I'd like to do is adjust the lighting. So I click this tab up here, and you can see that and we have different options here. You can try different ones and they change how the lighting looks around the cheesecake. Like, I like how this one's a little bit more even around the cheesecake for while you're painting. Like, I don't want it to be too dark when I'm painting one side of this. So this is pretty decent. And you can see the effect that has. It looks totally different. So I mean, this is filling in pretty fast. And the nice thing about the brush is that you kind of move around your mouse or your pen randomly enough in order to create that look of randomness. But it's really a repeating pattern, but the way you do it can really kind of hide it. That's repeating. And I'm going to go ahead and reference one of the photos again of the top of the cheesecake. So you can see that there are some darker dots in here. because this is pumpkin spice. And we can add that in a little bit manually, which would be fun, I think anyways. So we can do that with this option called jitter. So let's talk a little bit about what jitter is. Oh, you know what? Something that I might want to do at this point is you'll notice that there's a little bit of texture on the sides. So I don't know if I want to override that with the normal map. So I might actually turn off the normal for right now with this paint. And I can even make sure, if you're worried that, if you want to make sure to erase the normal map, you can turn it on with your eraser. And let's say I only want to erase the normal map on this layer. I can just go ahead and go over this and erase it from the areas where I don't really want the normal map affecting it, so that we can keep our original normal map in some areas. So that's another thing to keep in mind, because it's really easy to accidentally add things without thinking and then wanting to change your mind. So the eraser's helpful. And it's nice to be able to control exactly what you're erasing, so that if you don't want to erase everything, you don't have to. So let's talk about this jitter. So I'm going to change the color to like a nice dark brown. Let's see what we got in here. Maybe something like that is nice for spice. Okay, and then I really only want to affect the color right now. I'm going to make the size much smaller, so you can also see that adjust in here. And then if we scroll down, you'll see this option called jitter. I'm going to click this button here to see more options. And you'll kind of get a preview of it in there. Like, we can adjust the size jitter. We can also adjust the position jitter. And it just kind of randomizes it a little bit. And if you're looking at this and you want additional, you can type higher numbers on what you can kind of push that, I don't know what to call that, slider to the right. So I'm going to try 300 and see what that looks like. And you can see that looks much more speckly. We can adjust the flow so that these aren't all so opaque. We can adjust their angle a little bit, randomize them a little bit more. I'm going to reduce the flow just to make them a little lighter. And we're just going to try painting on here, so you get an idea of what that looks like. And if you scale it up, how it kind of scales still. So I feel like we need much more position jitter. So let's try 500 and see what that looks like. Feel like we're kind of getting somewhere. So it's a little bit of trial and error. Oh, that's much more speckly. I like that. I just think it's a little too opaque. Let's adjust the opacity or the flow. I'm going to make this slightly bigger. So now we're getting a little bit more of those specks that we can see in here. I'm going to hit undo because I want to trying to find what looks right. Maybe a little bit more flow. And then I'll just kind of click randomly throughout. Kind of like that. I kind of want to paint in that area a little bit more, so I'm going to adjust this. I could have saved a brush. You can also save brushes. I wasn't really thinking about doing that while I was doing this, but if I scroll down, I can go ahead and put this in the base color and turn off the normal map. We want the roughness and metal in here. And I'm just gonna paint in some areas over here. But I need to adjust the spacing and just turn off all the jitter. But you can see that you can get something pretty complex looking without having to do too much. And that's one of the great things about this. I feel like the practice is paying off. I think this cheesecake's looking better than the last one I did so far. So we still need to do the sides. I had a little bit of a different texture for the side of the cheesecake because I felt that looked a little bit different. So let's look at some of the photos of the side. So you can see here, there's these indents a little bit on it. I actually grabbed the crust from the bottom of this cheesecake just because I liked how the crust looked on this one. So that's this is kind of what we're working with here as a reference. And you can see that's a pretty challenging texture, but we took photos and that's a huge help. So I'm going to drag and drop this photo in here. And I might build this up as another layer just in case. And I'm going to name this center cheesecake. But this gives me some flexibility so that if I decide I don't like something, I can kind of remove it, but without like redoing everything. I think it's easier to do this with a Wacom pen. It helps a little bit. Since I have this button, follow path turned on, it does rotate the texture a little bit, and I find that's helpful because that actually makes it look a little bit more random, I feel. I actually like how I'm doing this texture on the sides a little bit more this time than what I did last time, because last time it felt a little bit, I had drawn in some of the marks a little bit more, and this just feels a little bit more real, I feel like, when I'm not drawing by hand. It just feels a little bit more like a real cheesecake to me. And you can see that it even blends a little bit around the edges, which is nice. That Substance Painter does that. And another cool thing about Substance Painter is that you'll see that you have different modes up here, and you can even paint on the 2D texture. So you can paint on here, and that's pretty sweet. I'm going to go back to 3D only. I feel like this is kind of the style I like for painting. Now you can see that this doesn't have very much contrast and value, and I want to adjust that a little bit. So I'm going to make another layer, and this time you can see we're mostly using these instead of the fill layer. Oh, and another thing is I noticed that I went a little bit over that edge, so that's one reason why it's helpful to keep different details on different layers, is because then I can go back to the erase and make sure that I'm not erasing things that I shouldn't be. Oh, I need to click on the right layer though. So I want to erase the center part of the cheesecake. Or I could just put this part on top of that layer, and that kind of seems to help. And then I can erase back this top layer. I need to make sure that I have the color selected. So I have this really big soft brush right now, so it makes a nice transition from one texture to the other. Before I move on to what I was going to do on that top layer, there are some little things that I kind of just want to adjust in here. I'm going to go back to my paint. You can also just choose colors here, and you can grab them from your model. So like, let's say I kind of want to match this color here and just fill in some areas manually. Maybe not with the full texture, but just with the brush. Just kind of lightly color in some areas. I can do that. I can reduce the flow a little bit. And this is also nice because if you want to give an area of the cheesecake a little bit more of an orangish color, you can. It also makes areas look a little bit less repetitive, I feel, when you add in a little bit of extra different colors in there. Just taking a look at this. One thing, I'm gonna go back to my textures here. Probably going to add this in a little bit in some areas. I think I need a little bit more of the center cheesecake here. To help with that transition. You can also see that the speckles seem to get a little bit smaller up at the top. So I might add in some more of those little speckles we had. I also feel like this really helps to break up the repetition of the brushes, kind of adding your own texture on top of what's already there. That looks nice. Okay. I think that I am improving as I practice doing this. I think this is getting better. Very cute Animal Crossing style cheesecake. I think I'm getting there. We still have this bit at the top that I want to adjust. And I also kind of want to exaggerate the shift from lighter to darker near the top of the cheesecake. I think that would be really nice. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I also have a party to go after this, so I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, I don't have much more time for painting cheesecake. I'm a little bit on the clock today. And let's see. This is going to be the layer we were going to talk about before I started finicking with other things. So this is going to be what we use to kind of lighten some areas. I'm going to choose a color down here, kind of like a warm yellowy color. And I just want to affect this with it. I'm going to turn off the jitters here. Size jitter, flow jitter, angle jitter, position jitter. Turn those off. And I want this to be a little bit smoother, so I'm going to decrease the spacing and just get something nice and silky smooth. Make this a little bit bigger. Soften it a little bit with this slider here. I might actually space this out a little bit more. I feel like sometimes increasing the spacing, you can kind of see it up here, but sometimes it helps make it look a little bit softer. And I feel like I just wasn't getting the effect otherwise. I'm just going to go around here. And at this moment, this might not be making sense, but we're going to kind of create an effect here, and it will make sense in a moment. So I want this to be, we can try different ways of doing this. Maybe we try soft light. Or screen. Oh, I like the screen option. Now, of course, we don't want this at 100%. That's a little bit intense. But you can see how just it lightens it up a little bit and adds another level of contrast, and how nice that is. So I was just looking a little bit too similar in value, and I didn't like that. We just needed a little bit more of a gradient. And I'm going to put this below the crust because I still want the crust to be darker. So there we go. Looking nice. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So we still have the whipped cream at the top. And let's just go ahead and use a fill this time. So we talked a little bit about a fill layer. It does like what it sounds like it does. It fills the layer. But we don't want it to fill everything. You can see it's kind of overpowering everything we just did. So we're going to right click on this and choose color selection. We're going to pick a color. We're going to choose this guy here. Okay. And now that we've done that, we know we're only affecting the whipped cream. So I'm going to go into this here and I'm going to look at our what we're affecting. We want the whipped cream to not be gray. We want it to be white. So I'm going to do that. We're going to make sure that the roughness can be somewhere around here. I feel like it wouldn't be too shiny. Maybe somewhere in the middle. Metalness, this is not metal, so we want that at 0. Normal maps aren't really necessary, I feel, for this. But I'll add them in just to kind of, in case if I drew on this or adjusted it earlier. I might keep that on just because when I baked out the textures originally, I added in some normal maps. And I really want them more for the cheesecake part than the whipped cream part, so I kind of want to just go over that part there. Now you'll notice that these carrots are just a plain color, and that's kind of boring. So I'll name the whipped cream, and then I'll start another layer really quickly here for the carrots just to finish them up. We're going to add another mask with our selection. Select it with the color picker. And here we are. We have our selection. And I'm going to name this carrots detail because right now these are just like a solid orange color, and that's kind of boring. It's not the most interesting. I'm going to try switching and being adventurous. We're going to switch to the 2D mode, and I'm going to try painting on here. And let's make sure that we have our brush selected. Scroll on down. And I want to affect the jitter a little bit here. Actually, before I do any of that, I want to make sure that, I think that, sorry, I'm going back and forth with what I want to do. I am going to increase the jitter. Okay, so something like that, and then I'm going to make this smaller. So affect the size. And you'll notice that the cool thing about this is like when you are drawing on these, that you're actually affecting, you're able to see the shadow in the 2D, not just in the 3D. And I feel like that's kind of unique to Substance Painter. I haven't seen that anywhere else. And if I actually moved around the light, you'd see the lighting shifts in here. I want to reduce this flow and try that again. Just because I feel like carrots aren't so perfectly all the same shade of orange. So that's why when I'm painting on here, it's not only taking into account the color that I'm painting, but actually the shadows in that area, which is kind of cool. Like, see, our whipped cream is completely white, but you're still seeing that shading on it. I'm going to switch out of this view back to 3D. Yes. Okay, so this is our cheesecake. And I think that the more that I do this, I am getting better because Okay, so save this in your mind. This is my second time trying at painting a cheesecake. And let's look at my first one I did. This is the first version. I think the second version has really improved. I think I've learned something. And I hope you feel like you've learned something too and you enjoyed this. I think this is a really cool community because we're always learning from each other as motion designers, and no one is, working alone completely independently. Even me as a freelancer, I'm constantly learning as much from all of you. So, um, yeah, I really appreciate all of you. And if you'd like to watch more videos, please give me a thumbs up, ring that bell, subscribe, and all of that. I hope you'll come back and you thought this was good. And I'll see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations.